Hey guys, welcome back to Bound by Grace podcast. I'm Amber Hunt. We have Andrea Kenny on with us.
Hey guys.
And today we're talking about boundaries in a marriage. So we wanted to dive in first to show the biblical aspect of boundaries and where it shows up in our Bibles, and where it showed up back then. So Jesus modeled boundaries not as barriers to love, but as expressions of love rooted in purpose, wisdom, and spiritual clarity. A few powerful ways he demonstrated this was he prioritized time alone with the Father. So despite the constant demands of the crowds, Jesus often withdrew to solitary places to pray. Luke 5:16 says that, and he knew that intimacy with God was essential for sustaining his mission. This boundary protected his spiritual health and kept him aligned with this purpose. He didn't say yes to every request. In Mark 1:35-38, after healing many, Jesus left early to pray. When the disciples found him and told him people were still looking for him, he said, "Let us go somewhere else. That is why I have come." He didn't stay to meet every need. He stayed true to his calling. Jesus walked away from toxic situations. So Jesus didn't engage with everyone who challenged him. When the Pharisees tried to trap him or when crowds became hostile, he sometimes walked away. And that's seen in John 8:59, Luke 4:29-30. He wasn't driven by people pleasing or fear. He was anchored in truth and discernment. He set emotional boundaries. Jesus loved deeply, but he didn't allow others' emotions to control him. For example, when Peter tried to dissuade him from going to the cross, Jesus rebuked him. Matthew 16:23, he didn't let even close relationships pull him off his mission. And he knew his limits in human form. Though fully divine, Jesus lived with the limits of a human body. He rested, he ate, and he slept. He didn't try to be everywhere at once. The humility in accepting limitations is a boundary in itself. So Jesus's boundaries weren't about self-protection. They were about staying faithful to his purpose. They teach us that saying no can be an act of obedience, and that rest, solitude, and clarity are not luxuries, they're sacred. And then Andrea's going to run into a different way of showing boundaries.
Yeah, and that's good, Amber. Everything you just said, that's spot on. Thank you for sharing that. So we start in the very beginning, in the Garden of Eden, right? God put a very clear boundary. He's huge on boundaries, and obviously that's what we're discussing today. But he put a very clear boundary in place from the very beginning of time. He said, "You can have everything here except this one tree," right? And then our sin-filled nature, like the way the enemy works, we went against what God said and started listening to the lies of the enemy, and ultimately it has caused nothing but destruction since then. And the same can happen in our marriages if we don't have firm boundaries in place to protect our marriage. And then when we realize Ephesians 6, of course, talks about how we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against essentially the demonic realm. And we've got a real adversary, Satan, who is against us, and he's against anything that God puts together, which is a holy union between a man and a woman. And so he's going to seek to devour and destroy that union, and he has nothing but time. So we have to be, he doesn't take breaks on his end. So we can't think that we can take breaks on our end. We have to really be guarded and stay alert and put those boundaries in place.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, and boundaries are there for our benefit. Yes, we have free will, but if we're all out there, especially with Satan running around through a lot of people, if we're all out there overusing our free will, look at what we have. We have murders, we have affairs, we have all sorts of evil things happening because people are crossing over boundaries. So boundaries are very important. They limit destructive behavior. And both God and society has laws and boundaries in place. Otherwise, there's consequences to that, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's in Proverbs 8:29 where he even put a boundary in place for the ocean. He created everything that we see. And the ocean itself, he spoke to it and said, you can go no further than this. So God is huge on boundaries. We should take on that same mindset and protect our marriage at all costs and have those very strong boundaries in place as well. And it's not controlling. God doesn't control us. Like I said, we still have free will, but it's for protection. We lock our door. That's a boundary. Not everybody's welcome inside of our home. We protect our purse when we're walking around. We protect our kids. Those are boundaries that we're putting in place for protective measures, not for control measures, but for safety measures. And we have to treat our relationship and marriage the same exact way. We have to protect it because there's a very real adversary that wants to destroy it. And when we understand that fully, we can better protect it.
Yeah, exactly. The Bible offers rich wisdom on boundaries, not always using the words directly, but clearly affirming the principle of setting limits for the sake of love, holiness, and peace.
Mm,
Here are some powerful verses that support that idea. So we have Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for
mm,
everything you do flows from it. This is a foundational verse for emotional and spiritual boundaries. Guarding your heart means being intentional about what you allow in, whether it's influences, relationships, or thoughts. And that's huge.
mhm.
Galatians 6:5, for each one should carry their own load. This speaks to personal responsibility. Healthy boundaries help us distinguish what is our load to carry and what belongs to someone else.
Right.
So that's a big one.
Yeah.
Um,
And that would cross into accountability versus being controlling. We
yeah,
have to,
exactly.
yeah, we have to keep in mind what we are responsible for and what our spouse is responsible for.
Yeah. Matthew 5:37, I tend to like this one. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one.
Amen.
Jesus encourages clear, honest communication. Boundaries often begin with the courage to say no without guilt. I know for me, I tend to be a yes person. Especially when I'm working, I'm a workaholic. So I tend to take on way too much. And that makes it where my workload is so heavy that my output isn't as great as what it could be.
Right.
And that's because I'm giving my energy to everything instead of focusing on one thing at a time. So we need to really know our boundaries in our marriages, but also in work and outside relationships.
Right.
1 Corinthians 6:12, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I will not be mastered by anything. This verse reminds us that freedom doesn't mean indulgence. Boundaries help us live in self control and avoid being ruled by unhealthy habits or relationships.
Amen.
And then Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So even Jesus, as we stated before, set boundaries around his time and his energy. He stepped away from the crowds to rest and reconnect with the Father. And then the last one that I have is Proverbs 22:28. Do not move an ancient boundary stone set up by your ancestors. So while this refers to physical property, it also symbolizes the importance of respecting limits, whether relational, moral, or spiritual.
That's good.
So boundaries are important in every relationship. It really is it is to make you comfortable and to not waste your precious energy on things that aren't going to bring life to you. This can be saying no when someone asks for help with watching their child or needing a ride or wanting help with a project. If you're a people pleaser, you tend to say yes to these things, and it ends up taking time away from other important aspects of your life or just taking away from your energy. So it's really about focusing on you and ensuring that you are properly cared for before giving that yes to someone else outside of your marriage and outside of your home.
Right.
Um, Telling your spouse that you are uncomfortable with certain sexual acts or uncomfortable when they get rides with opposite sex, which that is a whole different podcast on protecting your union. But these are just some ways to set healthy boundaries in your marriage. So I really want to go into why set boundaries. Obviously, biblically, it states that the boundaries are set for a reason, but psychologically, there are reasons why you would set boundaries in your marriage. Boundaries in a marriage are like the framework of a strong house. They don't restrict love, they protect it. So one reason why you would set boundaries is they preserve individual identity. Even in the closest marriages, each person needs space to grow, reflect, and maintain their sense of self. Boundaries help spouses honor each other's uniqueness without feeling threatened or neglected. They foster respect and trust. When couples clearly communicate what's okay and what's not, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, it builds mutual respect. Boundaries say, I value you enough to be honest about my needs, and I trust you to honor them. They prevent resentment. Unspoken expectations often lead to disappointment. That's usually when we fight in my marriage, is these expectations that I have or he has, and we never communicated them.
Right.
Boundaries bring clarity. Instead of silently stewing over unmet needs, couples can express them openly and avoid the slow buildup of bitterness.
That's good.
They strengthen communication. Healthy boundaries encourage honest dialogue, whether it's about time with friends, finances, or intimacy. Boundaries create a safe place or a safe space to talk without fear of judgment or rejection. And then they protect emotional and spiritual health. So boundaries help guard against emotional burnout, codependency, or spiritual disconnection. For example, setting time aside for personal prayer or rest can actually enhance the marriage by keeping each partner spiritually grounded.
Yes.
In essence, boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges. They help couples love each other more intentionally with clarity and compassion. So those are pretty big.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great information.
Yeah. So psychology views boundaries in relationships as essential for emotional health, mutual respect, and lasting connection. And here's how the field breaks it down. We have boundaries define the self. So, like we talked about before, psychological boundaries are the invisible lines that separate your thoughts, feelings, and needs from someone else's. They say, this is me and that is you. Without them, people can lose their sense of identity in a relationship. And that's where codependency comes in.
Mm-hmm.
They promote emotional safety. They prevent codependency. So when boundaries are weak, one partner may take on the other's emotions or responsibilities, leading to codependency, which can be very unhealthy for yourself, but also for your spouse, just for your marriage alone. They encourage accountability, and they vary by context. So psychologists note that boundaries aren't one size fits all. What's appropriate in a romantic relationship might not be in a friendship or workplace.
Right.
So these are really important things to keep in mind when we're setting boundaries.
Yes, and I have shared this many times before with people that I have spoke with, that the boundaries are there for you, your sanity, your safety, and ultimately you're the one that gets to make that call, right? So the person that you're setting the boundary for, person or persons, they don't have to understand the boundary in order to respect the boundary, and that's where you have to be strong enough to uphold that. And you had mentioned earlier about let your yes be yes and your no be no. I am so big on that, because the enemy, if he can't get us to actively sin, he's going to distract us. He's going to keep us too busy to be able to go and do the will of God, or even get in God's word, or even have communication and time with God. So if we're so busy explaining our boundaries to people and going back and forth and arguing with them as to why they're there, why they're deserved, all of these different things, we're essentially making our boundary null and void by crossing that line and giving this time and attention to someone else to explain why the boundary is even there. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. If I said I don't need you to call me, but you can text me only, then don't answer the phone call and only text only. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. I think that that is in with any of relationships that you have with your children, even. They like to ask why, why. If you keep allowing them to do that, that respect ends up dropping off of your no, and they end up just pushing the boundaries even further.
Yes, children are very, very wise, far more wise than I think a lot of people give them credit for. And I'm all for explaining. We have a toddler right now, and she's in that why stage, and I'm all for explaining up front, first and foremost, here's the answer to why you can't climb on the counter. But then she will continue with the why, and I've already spoke, she already heard me once, so after that I say that's enough, you don't need to ask me anymore. And I'm putting that boundary in place for my own sanity, because she'll sit there for the next 20 minutes asking why, and I've already told you I'm not going to spend any more time and energy explaining when I've already said that.
Yeah. Yeah. When my kids were toddlers, I would get on their level and explain it, with a soft voice and very
Yeah.
clear. I'd hold their hand while I did it, like trying to make them understand because this is dangerous for you or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. But yeah, the whys, if you let it in, they will continue. And then your no doesn't have this true respect on it.
Right, absolutely.
So now I kind of want to go into examples of how to set boundaries, what boundaries are important in marriage. And this is kind of a blanket, but it doesn't mean that you can't have other boundaries. This
Right.
is sort of just one I came up with thinking about my own marriage. So I'm going to jump into that. So the first one is emotional boundaries. So give each other permission to feel, process, and express emotions without judgment. That's
Mm.
really big. This includes not taking responsibility for your spouse's feelings, but offering empathy and support. This is a major reason why I statements are so important when
Yeah.
communicating feelings toward one another. We aren't playing the blame game, we aren't allowing manipulation. That in itself is a boundary.
Mm.
So, those I statements, if you're not familiar, if I'm speaking to my spouse and let's say he said something to the effect of, I like you better in the other dress. Just simple, example, doesn't mean it happened. And it hurt my feelings because why wouldn't you like me in the dress I had on? I could stay to him, you really hurt my feelings. You really shouldn't have said that. Or, which puts him on the defensive, or
Mhm.
I can say, I really feel insecure about the dress that you stated you didn't care for. I really feel like maybe I don't look good in this dress or I don't feel as good in this dress. And
Right.
I really want to feel good in everything I put on. I really want you to love everything I put on. But it's really I statements are extremely important.
Right. And I think it would, be safe to say, you could start it out by saying something like, I'm not sure that you may have meant it this way, but this particular statement made
Yes.
me feel a certain
Thank
way. And
you.
then that's
That's
still not
perfect.
putting him on the defensive. It's still
Yes.
expressing your own feelings, but it might bring clarity, because we all do have different perspectives, right? So he may not have ever realized, wow, that was kind of a harsh statement, or I could see now why you would think I felt that way about that dress, but it still is resting on you and not pointing a finger at him like you did wrong, you said this, you hurt my feelings. It's more of a let me express how this particular statement made me feel.
Yes. That's perfect. Much better than what I said.
Oh, no, no, you said it perfect. I just wanted to add on to what you said. Yours was great.
Yeah, it's better for me to like go off of actual examples where I've had to use I
Right.
statements, but I didn't have anything right off the top of my head. So I was trying to pull something and it didn't work out as well as I thought it would.
Yeah, and these things work so much better when you do have an open-minded partner that's willing to listen to you. But they're going to be far more apt to listen to you and me and everyone else out there listening when we do approach them with the I statements as opposed to the you. Because and that's an automatic thing in nature. We come at somebody, a stranger, a child, whoever, and we automatically have a you did this, you made me feel,
Yes.
and it's an automatic knee jerk reaction to be on the defense. Like, wait a second, let me defend myself. So if we approach it with this is how this made me feel, and even throw in, you might not have even meant it that way. I just have to share with you how it made me feel, and then let me hear your side, and let's clear this up.
I think that's important too, is to always say you may not have meant it this way, because then
Yeah.
it gives them a little bit of a softer approach to what's being discussed
Yeah.
and makes them a little like let down their guard a little, because they're like, wow, did I really mean it that way? I actually didn't. I especially didn't want to hurt you.
Right.
Um, so I think that's a really important statement to have. But those I statements are extremely important. And it takes practice to do that, because it does not come naturally.
Right. Have you ever
Um,
seen the post? There's two little cartoon characters, and there's a 6 and a 9, and they're right like facing each other. So the one little cartoon character, he's looking at the 9, and the other cartoon character is looking at the 6. And to one, it is a 9, and to the other one, it is a 6. But it's all essentially about perspective. That's what that post is about. And
it
yeah,
is.
and you had mentioned earlier, um we have to have clear communication, and our expectations have to be verbalized, because in your mind, if you're looking at this 6 and you're expecting your husband to see the same 6, he's never going to see it unless you express with your words, hey, come to my side real quick and look at it from my angle. And that takes communication, and it takes transparency, and honesty and respect when you're sharing it. Like, I don't need you to agree with me, but I want you to at least try to see it from my perspective.
That would be a great podcast episode, is men's brains versus women's brains, because
Yes,
we are
girl.
not made up the same. So when men see something, they see it in a totally different way than we do. So that's
Absolutely.
why communication is so, so important.
It's imperative. And I, honest to goodness, would put that above, almost to the very top. Obviously, having God first and foremost, and love is very important. It's probably right there underneath God. But I would venture to say that communication is within that top two or three category. Without it, absolutely everything will crumble. It is
Absolutely.
imperative to open our mouths and communicate. And how we communicate is extremely important, but we have to be able to communicate.
Yes. The next one is time and space. So, in a marriage, especially a young marriage, you think that you need to be on each other constantly, with each other constantly. To have a healthy marriage, there still needs to be boundaries set for time and space. So, even in deep connection, each partner needs time alone to pray, reflect, pursue hobbies, or simply rest and recharge. This boundary honors individuality and prevents emotional burnout. It's out of respect and love for your spouse that you allow them to have the time for themselves, because it's truly important, especially to those introverted spouses like myself. My husband is really good. So, my first marriage, I'm going to put that as an example. My first marriage, I would go to the store, I would go to Target, and I'd leave the kids with him. I'd get a phone call within maybe 10 minutes of leaving asking when I'm going to return. Like, there was a lot of pressure on me being gone. And then if I was ever in bed trying to watch a show of mine, he would show up and he would take over the TV. Like, I'd never have time alone. And I really was not as introverted back then, but I still needed that time to myself to pursue things that I enjoyed that he not necessarily enjoyed, and never got the opportunity to do so. I would go spend time with family and he would constantly be asking, when are you returning? When are you returning? So it made it really difficult. And I was always on edge whenever I was gone that I was going to get a phone call. With my marriage now, I don't have to really ask. If I feel overwhelmed, I'll go to my bedroom, put on my show. Yes, he realizes I'm not there and may check in the bedroom to see where I am, but he never asks, when are you coming out? He never says, hey, when are you coming home? I've even gone on a girls' trip, which may not be for every relationship, but ours, we've gotten to the point where we've been able to do this. I've gone on a girls' trip for a weekend, left him with the kids. I did not receive one phone call except to say goodnight. Like he respects my time that I need so much. When we first got together, I just started complaining about how tired I was, and we hadn't moved in together yet. And he was like, "Why don't you come over, give me the kids, and go take a long bath?" And I
That's
did. And he left me alone and ensured that the kids did not come in there the whole entire time.
wonderful.
Like respecting your spouse in that way is so huge.
Yes.
And it in turn has made it where I trust him and want to give him his time because he needs it too. He's gone on a guy's trip with my family and enjoyed himself so thoroughly that he was like, I don't know if I want to come home. But he really got that time to himself without me badgering him about, oh, this, that, and the other is going on with the kids. When are you coming home? It's so hard without you. That kind of stuff puts a lot of pressure on your spouse. You do need to be able to have that time and space and be
Right.
able to do it in a respectful way.
Yeah, and the first scenario that you gave, that example, that's an emotionally draining situation, and it is a level of codependency going on there. They're hanging their every reaction on, when are you coming back? What are you doing? And that's not healthy. And some of these things that we're talking about, I just want everybody to know that's listening, these are, especially some of the boundaries that we're sharing that we do inside of our marriage, these are kind of blanket statements. Every marriage looks different. So we have to fit in what works for us. But these are just some really good pointers on how to even begin and kind of what areas to move towards.
Yeah, absolutely. The next boundary that you may want to set is a spiritual boundary. So you respect each other's walk with God. That might mean setting aside personal devotional time or honoring different ways of connecting with scripture and worship. I know that I worship differently than my husband. So I know my walk is different than my husband's, and I'm not here to measure our walk against one another because it's a personal relationship between you and God. Um, it doesn't make one better than the other. It's very personal. But he grew up Methodist, I grew up Pentecostal, so our worship is very different. His is more reserved, and he's comfortable with that. I'm not here to make him step out of that boundary of his. Right now, in my husband's walk, he's uncomfortable with praying out loud. And what I mean by that is when we sit down to eat, I'll ask him each time, do you want to pray? And he'll be like, I'm not ready. So I take the lead when sitting down for dinner, and there is no judgment on him from me at all. I just say a tiny prayer between God and I that he works in my husband to give him that boldness to pray aloud eventually so he can lead in prayer for our family. It will happen, but I'm not going to push him when he doesn't feel ready.
Right.
The next one is communication boundaries. This is a really big one. I think this one is probably the top of all of them. So you agree on how to handle conflict, no yelling, no silent treatment, no bringing up past wounds to win an argument, no walking away or hanging up the phone on each other. Boundaries like we pause when things escalate can protect the relationship during tense moments. I was the queen of silent treatments, but it made my spouse feel unsafe. He would instantly get anxious and feel like this is the end, doom and gloom. So now I simply tell him everything is going to be okay. We are okay. I'm just not ready to talk. I need time to calm down, and then we will speak. And
Yes.
that's my boundary. And he respects that once I reassure him that we are okay. This fight doesn't mean I'm done.
Right. The anxiety around silent treatment or walking away is so big. My husband and I went through that in the very beginning of our relationship, and I was the one that made it very clear, because from his past, he was used to separating himself from a situation in order to collect his thoughts. To me, someone who was very codependent, especially at the time due to past traumas and whatnot, I took that as a form of abandonment and rejection, and it made me so anxious. So from the very beginning of our relationship, I was the one to verbalize and make very clear this is how this makes me feel. We can't do this because I can't be on this high level of anxiety every time I feel like you walk away. Because in my mind, those are the thoughts that went through my mind. Oh my gosh, he's leaving. This is it. It's over. And it was just a disagreement. So we're very, very good with um, communicating and saying, "Hey, I need a few minutes."
Yeah.
I'm more so the one that does the reassuring when it comes to that. Like, I'm upset right now, but no matter what, I still love you. I'm not going anywhere. We are together forever. This is eternal. But I need some time. But I love you, and I'll even say it multiple times just to overly reassure him, because I don't ever want him to feel like I have felt before, that someone's going to walk away from me.
Yeah, so we're opposite. My husband's the one that has the abandonment issues where he feels like it's the end, like doom and gloom, it's the end, she's done. And now I've gotten to the point where I don't want him to feel that. I don't
Right.
want him to feel insecure, like I'm going to leave. So I instantly reassure him and just tell him I need time. And he gives me that time when I reassure him. If I
Right.
don't
Very good.
reassure him, when I was in the beginning of the relationship, I would just shut down, turn it off, and walk away.
Mm.
And I wouldn't answer him. He would come after me. He would try and talk. It would just make me more angry.
Mm.
And I didn't realize the anxiety that it caused him. I
Yeah.
just thought he was trying to get me to talk, and it wasn't the case. He wanted to be reassured that we were okay.
Right. Well, good. I'm so glad that y'all have that growth, and y'all were able to communicate through that, and you're respecting him by sharing and reassuring with him that you're not going anywhere, and then in turn he's respecting you by giving you the space that you need, and all of that was made possible by communication and
Absolutely.
respect and love for one another.
Yeah.
That's
The
awesome.
next one is physical and sexual boundaries. So, consent, comfort, and mutual respect are key. Talk
Oh,
openly about needs, preferences, and limits. This builds safety and deepens intimacy. I know us women, most of us women, have a hard time communicating our preferences. We are okay saying, I'm uncomfortable, but we get very intimidated and shy to say what we like and need.
right.
Sex is meant for both partners to experience connection and pleasure. So I challenge our female listeners more than anyone to be more open with their partner and telling them what pleases you. Trust me, your spouse wants to please you. They are up for the challenge, and I don't know of any man that will tell their wife no on anything in the bedroom.
Right. And I
So,
think that they desire that. Men are very um simple in direction wise. They need to be told, not in all areas, but in that particular area. But I think it makes them feel better and desired and wanted, like, hey, she's actually communicating with me what it is that she wants. And it can be a turn on for them that you are being so open as to what makes you feel good.
yes, and they want to give that to you. They take it as a
Right.
challenge and they see that as another thing that they can, another conquest they can take over. So it's a big deal for men. So as a call to action to our female listeners, the next time you are about to become intimate, voice what it is you like, what you need, or what you want to try so you can receive satisfaction, because this is all your spouse really wants, is to satisfy you. But those boundaries are very important. So if there is something that makes you uncomfortable, if you're uncomfortable saying it, um, I hate to say it, but you have no one else to blame but yourself. You really have to say it because your spouse can't read your mind.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
and then if it goes unspoken, that's kind of like the expectation thing. Resentment and bitterness can start setting in because you want something different, but you're not speaking out and saying that. So when they continue to do the same thing over and over, eventually you're going to get hardened in your heart, and you're going to be like, oh, and then it's going to become, I don't even want to be with them intimately because this is what's going to happen. So you've got to bite that bullet and speak up, and it can be done so in a loving manner. But
exactly.
communication is essential for sure.
Exactly. And I have a boundary. It's not a sexual boundary, but my boundary is physical. And it's so I deal with autism, and that gives me hypersensitivity. So that
Mhm.
means if I were to be pricked, then it's going to hurt a little worse than most people. And any feeling that I have is a lot stronger. So anything small in my body, it seems like I'm a hypochondriac, but it's actually a feeling that I'm having. So I've found minor health issues that they usually wouldn't find until later on in life, when they become big issues because of the hypersensitivity. So what that means is if I get tickled, it's enjoyable in like 2-minute increments. But if I get tickled to where it's over that 2 minutes, it becomes extremely uncomfortable and makes me want to crawl out of my skin. Like it
Right.
almost is painful. So that's a boundary of mine, and my whole family knows it. At least my immediate family, where I don't tickle mommy. It's something she can't handle.
Right. Sensory overload is what I like to refer to it as. I have some of those issues as well. Too many people talking at one time, or too many noises going on at one time. I have chaos going on inside of my mind
Oh,
when,
yes.
when those things happen.
And for our listeners, if you have that, I have a fix. If it's winter outside, instantly walk outside, no coat, no nothing, and just breathe. If it's not winter outside, fill your sink or a bowl up with water and ice and dunk your head for 30 seconds. It will reset your nervous system and your mind.
Yeah, that's good. I've had anxiety attacks before where I've actually put my head in some cold water, and it does. It resets you pretty instantly. It's like a shock to your system, like, okay, let's get back to reality.
It is.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. Another boundary that most people have really hard times with is family and in law boundaries.
Yes.
So decide together how much access extended family has to your time, your home, and your decisions. And I'm going to put something else in there, not just that, but also your children. Unity here prevents outside voices from dividing the marriage. This is so important. Some families overstep, especially with their grandchildren or their opinion of your marriage or us individually. Out of respect for your spouse, set those boundaries with your parents. So if it's the female, she needs to set them with her parents. If it's the male, he needs to set them with his parents. If your spouse raises concern with you about your parents, it is your responsibility to protect your spouse. Yes, we are still obedient to our parents, but God literally said to leave your parents and cling to your wife. So they are now your priority over your parents, and you need to make those boundaries and communicate them respectfully to your parents or other family members or friends.
Yes, that's very good information. And I think we could do a whole separate podcast one day on dealing with that topic alone. And we can go down the route of co-parenting as well. That there has to be very strong boundaries in place when co-parenting. You and I both have blended families. So when we're dealing with the parents of the children, we've got to have boundaries in place for that.
Oh, yeah, co-parenting. I'm writing this down so that way we don't forget any ideas we have. Another one is technology and privacy. So might be a little touchy for some people, but you set expectations around phone use, social media, and digital transparency. For example, we don't keep secrets, but we also respect each other's personal space. I show that I trust my husband by not going through his phone like I used to do in the beginning of our relationship. I had a lot of past trauma with electronic devices and finding things on my ex-spouse's phone. So it was an instantaneous thing that I did with this spouse, and it made me feel crazy.
Yeah.
But you better believe we have one another's passwords. And when we
Yeah.
get text, we usually disclose who it is and what they're asking. This isn't because we don't trust one another, but because we respect each other and want to reassure one another that there isn't anything to be worried about.
Yeah.
I can go through his phone and he can go through mine at any time. But I've worked on myself over the years to not need to go through his phone, and it's given me peace. So if you truly have a spouse who is cheating or watching porn, those things will come to light, and there is nothing you can do to stop them if that is their intention. So me going through his phone just makes him feel like he's under a microscope. I'm
Yeah.
not building a strong, trusting relationship when I do that. I'm putting him on edge, making myself feel crazy while I search constantly, and
Mhm.
making our relationship feel unsafe. Honestly, in my experience, they just get better at hiding those things if that
Yes.
is what they truly are going to do. So
Yes.
sit back, relax, and learn to trust your spouse. My mentality now is I trust him. And if he decides one day to falter and cheat on me, it will be his loss,
That's
not
exactly
mine.
right. That's exactly right. And it'll be nothing you could have done to prevent it. There's no amount of digging that's going to stop someone that is prone to do that. So like you said, yeah, take that load off of you and stop checking every message or whatnot, and then just let go and trust, because you're right. Everything that happens in the dark comes to light.
It does. I experienced that with my ex spouse. It was like the Holy Spirit was speaking to me, hey, you need to look into this. And
Yeah,
it was at that moment that everything came to light. And it was mind blowing and came from left field. I wasn't expecting it. And it rocked my world at the time. But there would have been nothing I could have done. I mean, I was giving everything to him. We were very codependent and we were very sexually active. There's nothing I did wrong that caused him to do those things.
correct. And
Um,
but when that betrayal happened, when you had that, all of a sudden there was a new neural pathway that was made inside of your brain, and that's why that trauma response carried over into your next relationship. You were on high guard of, I've got to check this to prevent this from happening. And
yeah,
so grateful that you know now that no amount of checking will ever prevent infidelity. That
no,
that lies on the accountability of that own person, their
yes,
free will. Yeah.
yes. And back then, I also thought it was me. Like it made me
Oh yeah.
feel less than a woman that I am. But now, through growth and through dealing with that trauma and trying to heal from that trauma, I've learned it is not you when someone cheats.
Amen.
Um, the other one is financial boundaries. Agree on spending habits, budgeting, and financial goals. Boundaries like we don't make large purchases without discussing it can prevent resentment and build trust. So here's something important about that. Put a price on the purchases that need to be discussed. Like anything over $30 that isn't filling up your tank of gas needs to be discussed, or whatever the purchase amount is for your household. But I would put a dollar amount on it so there isn't any confusion.
Right.
We do that in my home, but we also tell each other anytime we spend money after the fact. Like I bought a coffee and I text my husband that I went to Starbucks. He went to eat with coworkers and afterwards he told me he went to eat with coworkers. Like these little spendings, we still tell each other that we spent, just out of communication with one another and respect for one another and knowing that the finances are combined in our household. So it takes both of us being responsible and communicative to make that work.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important one. I'm glad you shared that. My husband and I have the same thing. If it's anything that's, large or even fairly large, it's always discussed. He's not asking me for permission. He's just saying, hey, this is something I'd like to do. What are your thoughts on it? And that's just goes back to respect, and it goes back to us having shared finances. So yeah, he's not asking me, hey, can I buy this? I'm not the breadwinner, and I'm not the one that makes the decisions. We make them together, and it's just a respect thing. Hey, this is what I'd like to do. Let me know your thoughts on it. And he's open to hear what I have to say. And we both come together with financial minds, and we're like, well, let's see what the benefits and risks are, and then we go from there. But it's a united decision. It's not just a, hey, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this in secret. It's
Oh,
just,
yeah,
and it's another moment to be brought closer together. And that's ultimately what our journey through life as a married couple is, to become one flesh.
absolutely.
That doesn't mean we lose our individuality. It just means that we have that respect and honor for one another to do things in line with God's will. Obviously, we can't go out there and overspend. That would be considered kind of like a form of gluttony, I think,
Yeah.
any kind of overindulgence in anything. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's putting your family in a bad position when you overindulge in spending.
Yes.
That's obviously irresponsible and something that some people have issues with. There's addictions to spending. And if that's you and you need help or resources, please reach out to Bound by Grace podcast at gmail.com. We're happy to give you any resources we can, because some people do struggle with that.
Yeah, I was one, they have the impulse section when you're checking out at grocery stores or
Yeah.
Dollar Tree. Yeah, from trauma, throughout my whole years of life, I was one of those very erratically minded, oh, I gotta have it now. I was the one to fall for those little impulse buys. And there's reasons behind all of that. And so if someone out there listening has that, there are ways to definitely get it under control, and finding the root issue of why. It kind of goes along with people who hoard and hold on to stuff. There's a
Absolutely.
root issue behind pretty much every behavior that's out there. And if we can, especially through with the help of the Holy Spirit, get to the root cause of why do we do these things? Why are we promiscuous? Why do we struggle with addiction? Whatever the case may be, there's generally a root somewhere. And oftentimes it's rooted in childhood. But sorry, I
Yeah.
got on a little segue
No,
there.
no, it's honest. I used to impulse buy, and it used to put me in a really bad way. I remember spending my whole rent check on nothing but stuff to decorate my home with.
Yes, girl, I have been there.
And I knew that was wrong, but I still did it. And it made me feel this high and really good when I did it. But then you have that feeling of doom and gloom afterwards, like, well, what the hell am I going to do now? And
Right,
that particular moment, I remember I went and the next day took everything back. But
right.
that wasn't the case always. Sometimes I would just deal with what I've done and have to deal with not having money for certain ththings.
Right. And it's just like an addiction. So and you spoke on this a few podcasts ago, I believe, but there's a dopamine rush when with anything that we do, and our brain remembers that. So when you buy, whether we acknowledge it or not, there is a rush of dopamine that happens. And that's how cycles get started. That's how addictions get started. That's how hoarding happens, addictions happen, impulse buying. So yeah, that's all tied essentially to addiction. So there we go back to our original topic of boundaries. We
Yeah.
have to have boundaries in place even with our own selves.
Even with our own selves, we absolutely
Yeah.
do. So, for our listeners, these boundaries that we went through again are a blanket boundary examples and ideas of what you can do, but these aren't rigid rules. They're living agreements that evolve as your relationship grows.
Yes, that's good.
So, that's pretty important to note on the boundaries. But it's up to you to keep that boundary and to have people respect it.
Right. And it can be done so in a respectful manner. When we respect ourselves enough to say, hey, this boundary is important to me, then we'll stop all the small talk and try to explain everybody, this is why I have my boundary, this is what I expect, and going back and forth with, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and be at peace with yourself. Don't worry about them and the kickback they may give you. It's not for them, it's for you. But you got to
Yeah.
be the one to uphold it
Yes. I have a
without
friend.
guilt.
Yeah, absolutely. Without guilt. I have a friend that's huge on boundaries to where she sets boundaries in our relationship as friends. She is very, very liberal. I am more on the line of liberal and conservative, but I guess I'd be more conservative in all aspects of it. And when the Trump administration was running and the presidential campaign was running, she was very big on, we can talk about anything, but we can't talk about this. We
Right.
can't talk about the campaign. We can't talk about who's running. We can't talk about the policies being put in place. That's my boundary. And I, wanting to be closer to her, wanted to know her opinions on certain things. I wasn't pushing my agenda on her. I wasn't trying to change her mind. I wanted to know what she thought. And apparently, I was crossing a line of talking about the campaign. And so she shut me down very quickly. We had a huge argument. It was the first argument I had had with a friend where it really hurt me.
Yeah.
And, I felt like as friends, we should be able to talk about anything. But the reality is, we have to respect each other's boundaries. If she's
Right.
uncomfortable with doing that, I need to respect her enough and care for her enough not to cross that boundary. So we,
Right.
of course, came back together and both apologized to one another because we had said some hurtful things and didn't cross that boundary again. I'm going to let you know that right now.
Right.
So there's boundaries set in place for a reason, and it really does come down to your comfort.
Yes.
Great. Andrea, do you have anything else you want to discuss during the podcast before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm good for today. I definitely have some points in my head, and I know that you've written some of those down, because I think this topic can certainly go in several different directions. But yeah, I think we'll do another one on um, family members and friends and people that are close to us, and co-parenting. I think that's got to be a whole nother podcast. But as
Yeah.
for today, I think you had some amazing information. I hope everyone that listens is blessed by this message. And I guess I'll sign it off my part by saying, I'm 38 years old. It took me 35 years of being silent and not being able to say the word no. It's literally like I had something controlling me where I was almost mute. I could not, for the life of me, say the word no. And it's not until I started digging in the Word of God and I realized how big He is on boundaries, and how much I needed them for myself, that I learned the word no. So if anyone ever feels like, oh my gosh, I just can't say that, please understand that I understand. And there is so much power and so much liberation. And I'm still one of the kindest people, and I'm not boasting at all, but I still have a kind heart. So I understand those feelings of not wanting to say it, but there's so much power and liberation in being able to say the word no, and being able to say it guilt free. Because you
Absolutely.
can stretch yourself. I think you said that at the beginning of this podcast. You can stretch yourself so thin that it will take a physiological toll on you. You will be tired, you will be anxious, and you'll be no good for your spouse if you don't know how to put that boundary in place. So be bold and courageous, ask the Holy Spirit for help, and get comfortable with the word no. It is going to be your best friend, and you can still do it in a soft, gentle, Christ like approach. But it is so important for you, your physical health, and the health of your marriage.
Absolutely. And you can sift through those fake relationships very quickly with the
Yes,
word
girl.
no. People sometimes only stay around because you're the yes man.
Yep.
And they're not there for true relationship with you. They're there to rely on you because you're always the one to say yes. So they're more so using you. So you can sift through those fake relationships very quickly with the simple word of no.
Yes. Amen.
All right, guys, I really appreciate all of our listeners. Again, if anybody wants to reach out or you have something that you would like to share on our podcast, please reach out to boundbygracepodcast@gmail.com and we'll discuss that with you. Or if you have any issues setting boundaries and need some resources, we can definitely try and get you those. So again, boundbygracepodcast@gmail.com. And I really appreciate all of you. You guys have a wonderful day.
Bye, guys.